Good morning, folks, and welcome to Infrastructure Matters, episode 70. We are back again with your favorite friends, Keith Townsend and Dion Hinchcliffe. We are going to be talking all earnings. We're going to be talking earnings as it really pertains to this Google Clouds, or the cloud, not this Google Cloud, but the cloud stuff and AI. Also, we're going to get into some kind of really cool stuff that's happening with the AI in terms of where the cost is and what's been going on. So with that kicking off, I think, Diane, you had some things to talk about within terms of this, the earnings, what we're hearing about.
Well, we heard Amazon's earnings yesterday, and they came in just a tiny bit under estimates and getting really punished for that. And we saw similar things with Microsoft and Google. They're just struggling to meet cloud demand is the story that we're hearing from folks like Andy Jassy, from Microsoft CFO Amy Hood, saying that they just don't have the space, the capacity. The AI demand is off the charts, and they simply can't build enough. And Amazon's reporting yesterday said they're going to put $100 billion in the capex this year. That's the biggest number we've heard. Microsoft is saying 80, Google's saying 75 billion. That's $250 billion in capex, which, as I go really digging into it, about half of that is AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so this really, there's this narrative emerging that the hyperscalers can't keep up. But we talked to a lot of practitioners, and it's not clear that there really is that demand there. This is maybe a lot very speculative. Keith, I know that you had some sharp point of view on this.
Yeah, so I've used both Gemini and Copilot as desktop assistants. I'm going to say not good. The promise is the capability isn't meeting the promise. Both of these companies are asking quite a bit for it. When we talk in our CIO, CTO panels, most of the CTOs I talk to question the value for the overall capabilities. And then there's still the debate around agentic AI and where is these workloads going to run. David Lithicum, who's a long-term cloud watcher and management consultant, pretty famous in the space, was taking a victory lap this morning. He was saying a year ago, he warned that AI isn't going to be the growth engine that these companies expect because they're not building what customers want and how he assumes they will consume AI. So there's a little bit of debate. Is the demand truly there, or is the numbers disappointing because the services aren't meeting the expectations?
Well, if I go and quote directly from their earnings calls, the Google CFO said new capacity issues impacts revenue. And they were up 30% year to year in terms of their Google Cloud. Now, specifically on the AI, I'm not sure which ones the numbers were. And then if you go to the Microsoft, Amy, I believe her name is the AI capacity constrained Q3. And so when they're giving guidance for this next quarter, even though Azure was, they're expecting a 31 to 32% growth on Azure, the AI has some impact. So this is kind of, where they're pulling it back. I mean, it's, and I guess what it is because the market may be just overvalued right now or something along those lines, because you think about, when Azure talks about, or Google or Microsoft talks about their AI growth, it's $13 billion is what they're equating to that. And that is up 175% year to year. So there is growth there. It's just a question of how big is this going to be? I was about to say a customer.
Well, and is it strong growth? So we've done some other work for other cloud vendors and with CIOs, and what we're learning is that they're giving away large amounts of promotional credits for some of these AI cloud services, in hopes that you'll build something around it and then have to keep paying for it. You'll like what you build and then you keep it, and if that is what's driving this incredible demand. We know how big the cloud market is now. They're saying they can't build fast enough, and they're going to put $250 billion, which is by far the highest watermark ever. Is it strong growth though? Are they really giving away a lot of services right now on the books as cost of sales and hoping to to hook enterprises on these AI services, and it's the total a speculative bubble. I mean, I think that's the real risk.
Very
Yeah, the time will bear this out, right? We will start to see the results in the market, just like when early cloud providers, Microsoft, leveraged credits early on in their cloud Azure journey, and we saw the numbers, but we didn't see the use. That eventually changed as the services got better. So we could see a little bit of both, that they're seeding the market by giving away the credits, booking that revenue as customer, and they're getting ahead of the demand from a capacity perspective. We don't know. But time will tell.
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
well, and that balances back to the research work that you've done, Dion, and also that we're seeing, both from the CIO and the CEO insights work, and the conversation that has been having, even coming out of Davos, and the ability to really move true impactful AI technology is dependent upon on the data, and that data preparation, that data cleansing, that data, all the things that go around making it safe and secure.
Absolutely.
That slows the process down. So even if the capacity is there, or maybe if I think which is it? Is it the capacity that's not there to be able to do the training that you're looking to do, or is it the data that is having problems getting to the point that we can do something about it, or is it purely being able to see, as you've talked about, as the ROI of this particular applications? I think all three of those areas have potential to slow this down to what I would think is a normal pace.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is a breakneck pace. Well, we did see a clear signal in our CEO survey in particular that those reporting a significant number of stalled or failed AI efforts, 60% of those were reporting data as the primary issue. So it's the leading issue, is holding back AI in the enterprise. Is the data story is poor in many organizations, have been underinvesting, and they may be trying out all these AI services and discovering that their data isn't there. So yeah, that'll have to be our next line of inquiry.
Yeah. And then, coming up in this month, we're going to have maybe the end of this month, maybe the end of February, we'll see the Dell announcements. And so we'll hear more about where they're going in terms of the server. We saw the IBM's announcements on their earnings and what they're talking about in terms of their growth. It's been fabulous. I'm more or less expecting the same thing coming out of Dell in terms of how they've been performing in those areas. So it's when you're saying the capacity is not there, and if we're looking at what's happening with the shipments coming out of the folks that are going to on-prem, and they're shipping as much as they can, if that's what we're seeing now, I'd say that issues around the cloud, Keith, would be more along the lines of what they're saying versus they're not building the right things.
The other thing that's hidden in the numbers, because I think so much of AI is focused on training right now, we don't know how much actual inference and agent adoption is happening. So how much of the dedicated AI services are being consumed versus people coming to cloud and building their own and just using EC2 instances and CPUs to do the lightweight inferencing that they need to do. So we do need a lot more clarity and a lot more data to actually make this,
Well, and you bring up a good point. How much of this demand is actually artificially driven by venture investment? And these are not necessarily your traditional enterprises. These are actually AI companies trying to build quickly in the cloud, and creating artificial, demand that may not hold, depending on how all it's got. So it's all very interesting, what's going to happen here.
Well, that kind of gets me to this next topic, and we'll come back to a little bit on, OpenAI and that kind of things. It's on their benchmarks, but Stanford and University of Washington released a paper on their development of doing fine-tuning through distillation on Google's reasoning model, Gemini 2.0, one of their models, for $50. I don't think the Stanford research were being paid, so you have to add in the cost of labor, which can add a lot.
Well, I'm still going to go with my promotional credit story. I'm hearing this a lot, so
So it was a $50 and somebody else did it for, 450 or whatever. So maybe one of you guys could do a little riff on what is distillation? What does that mean? Because I bet you 90% of the people that are listening to this don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I'm one of the 90%. What is distillation?
Well, the distillation is taking some of the data that you have there and using some of the techniques to do the analysis on it. So it's not using as much processing power and this is where OpenAI came from. Not OpenAI, rather the DeepSeek came from in terms of what they were doing is a distillation of somebody else's model. And that's the model that they're assuming.
Well, that's the accusation that some people would say is that they distilled OpenAI's model down into a more efficient model.
Yeah.
So my understanding is distillation is taking a large model and saying, all right, let's create a smaller, more efficient model that doesn't have everything in it, but maybe aimed at a specific use case or domain or something like that. And that way you can run it.
Distillation. I feel like Homer Simpson when he looked at the word gem and pronounced it gyme. And then when he figured out what it was, he was like, "Oh, gyme, distillation." So so I've read this OpenAI paper, and it's really interesting from what they did. They mentioned that they've taken larger models, and they're not saying that they did not take a larger model and distill it. What I don't think that they do in the paper is call out OpenAI directly. And I think this is the amazing feat, whether they did or not. Personally, they take my data and OpenAI uses my data to inform their models. I don't have a problem with it. And I think generally speaking, none of us should have a problem with the ethics behind what this process does. But what's really interesting, the innovation is the reasoning. And there was a lot of news, and we'll get to that, around the reasoning capabilities that they then come out with. And you come out with better models. So with this Stanford research and this Stanford project, we're starting to see the fruit of the advancement of AI reasoning.
And is that, because how does that where do you see that impact then?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges with AI is getting it, and I think I talked to this about a year ago during my 100 days of AI, is getting AI to think like your organization. Like, if that makes sense, a manufacturing organization thinks differently than a healthcare organization. As a matter of fact, two organizations within the same business unit might think differently, or as they're calling it, reasoning. So how do you get a model to reason to the needs of your organization? When you send through a prompt or you have an agent working, how do you get it to make decisions that are consistent with your organization's strategy, and on top of that, do it at a reasonable cost? And we're getting to that point where techniques just as distillation and advanced reasoning, the lower cost of retraining these models is going to have, my opinion, really great advancements around getting smaller models that are able to be positioned in a way to make better decisions within your organization.
It was also Arvind, the CEO of IBM, had a post on LinkedIn, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. It was fairly long, talking about how there are, and reflecting on DeepSeek, and how these models were finding new ways, and I talked about this last week, new ways to lower the cost of development. And he reflected on how we have done this over and over and over again in our industry. Call it Moore's Law, call it whatever you want to call it, but he cites all the other technologies that we have been faced with and initially were extremely expensive, and then innovation brought us to this place. This seems to be moving faster there to that place than we expected. Perhaps, but I'm going to go back to the same thing. We still are running headlong, even though we get more efficient and less, maybe possibly need to use less energy, et cetera, to get to this space, possibly being able to do all the things on somebody's AI PC as opposed to, an entire data center of those things. We'll probably end up with the big, huge, massive language models, those language models, and then some unique other models that are unique to the industry, which we've been talking about, and then the distillation of what this is talking about, which is very cost efficient, and reasoning. So then the question is going to be, how is the quality of the reasoning coming out of these guys? So we've seen some of the reasoning coming out a little bit interesting. So.
Well, this is what everyone's right now talking about, something called Jevons paradox. We're talking about the big hyper scalers, and saying that that all of this will leads to more compute and storage, not less. You never use less compute and storage. No matter, you get much more efficient and it's cheaper, then you find all new applications and all new things that you can do with it. And that's, this is the problem also with energy. When you create cheap energy, people say, wow, I got all these new applications I can do now that was not affordable before. I can now run off and do it. And so the demand never goes down, no matter how much you try and conserve. No matter how much you try and get more efficient, it just creates more demand because you can do more things. So.
And closets are the same problem.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly.
Don't forget the closets. You'll always fill them up, whatever you have. Okay, let's, have we hammered on this one enough? If not, we can go to a couple of other topics.
Yeah, well, I have one that was very interesting. One of my predictions is that we are on the cusp of what's called super intelligence. And I've been, promoting this idea of, since it seems clear, if you look at the benchmarks, if there is, suites that measure the IQ, the human IQ.
Super intelligence is cloning you? Is that what that is?
No, by no means. And this is when AI is smarter than any human that has ever lived. And that's where we are. We're on the cusp of that. And proof of this is OpenAI just released a new service called Deep Research. This is a model that does extended in-depth inquiry, extended in-depth inquiry. It doesn't just consult the models. It goes out there and looks at research. It queries the internet. And it can take, dozens of minutes to hundreds of minutes to run a single query. And it's only available in OpenAI's highest tier of service. And what's interesting is that it blows the doors off of the hardest AI benchmark, which is called humanities final exam, humanities last exam. And this is a AI benchmark created, and all the questions on it are extremely difficult. Like, take this very hard to read, very obscure archaeological inscription of a dead language that almost no one in the world knows, and transcribe it in these different languages. That's the kind of test it has on there. It has math and geometry questions that most humans can't solve, and so most LLMs like GPT-4 passes at a 3.3%. But things like O3, OpenAI's model passes at 10%. Well, Deep Research can pass it at 25%, by far the highest scoring model on that benchmark. This is something that probably none of us can answer any of the questions. We probably couldn't answer a single question on that benchmark, no matter how much time we were given.
Yeah, so when I saw this announcement, I'm like, oh, well, it looks like my career pivot to doing something other than research has started.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we're not quite there yet. Sriram Subramanian, who is a fellow independent analyst, a pretty sharp guy, spent some time with it trying to get the model to write a report type of output, not just answer questions. And we see a little bit of the capability in the lower end model, the mini, the O3 Mini does a little bit of this on the light side, and I played around with it, and it is absolutely great at answering questions and giving you a start. But he claims, Sriram claims that he wasn't able to get it to do anything more than like 1,000-word blog post, and the quality wasn't that great. It was still hallucination. It went off on tangents, didn't keep a consistent methodology. So I think it is a great indicator of what it will go to be one day. But right now it seems like much more of, again, a human in the loop type tool that gives you a good starting point of where to start your research, but not, conduct deep research.
Well, it also raises the question of, how much do these AI benchmarks really tell us about what it will do, what an AI model will do for us in the real world, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, because what you were citing were equations and getting answers to an equation that you said very few humans can do. But those are known equations as well. The question is can it solve the equations that we can't solve?
Well, and that's my theory on superintelligence is that, it can solve. I mean, what they're arguing is that those equations are known, but most people can't actually do the math. It's too involved with too many variables. And you can't come up with the answer, whereas supposedly this can. And so the question is, again, how useful are these benchmarks in telling us what these models are going to do for us in the real world? And, it's going to be interesting to see. But nevertheless, we see models like O3 are coming in consistently at about 135 IQ. We're going to see models that can do in excess of 160, which now puts them well outside of, Six Sigma in terms of how many people can perform at that level. Where this is something that anyone can use. We're all going to have, certifiable geniuses in our pockets here soon.
On your iPhone.
That's right.
There we go. Okay, so let me switch to a couple of other things. Of course, on the data side, we have to talk about that because it's me.
Yeah, of course.
Wicca. We saw some of the companies that are on the data side that is particularly we're still in the AI piece of it, that had some layoff on some people. At the same time, we have a flip side of Hammerspace, which is another software data offering that announced 10 times growth. Granted, they're a fairly small company, but still, that's a very, very significant number to grow on and could really straighten the company. So, Keith, Wicca, you've been plowed into that one. I didn't get plowed into that because of my travels. So,
yeah. So Wicca is an interesting story, right? If you follow HPC at all, Wicca. They do storage fast. They are a fast storage system. You would think that would naturally translate to being a good system for AI, but according to reports, the overall challenge is that they didn't pivot quick enough into AI. They have strong revenue, $100 million. $100 million run rate. They're valued at about $1.6 billion based on their last round of funding. So fundamentally seems well, but they're part of this larger debate. How much to rotate to AI, and can you over-rotate to AI? And Wicca seems to be the case where they didn't rotate to AI enough.
Well, there's a couple things that we're saying that the traditional file systems like the NetApp, the Dell, VAST leading the charge as well, have gone to, which is announcing some work that they're either integrating with a Starburst or some other companies that are doing vector databases, et cetera. They're integrating with all the pieces that need to come together to do all the data management that we're talking about in terms of privacy and those kind of things. They're developing methodologies to import data more easily into there so they would be the holders of all the data. So varying strategies, VAST and NetApp are building it in the systems. Dell right now is partnering. Now, take that with where Wicca has been. Wicca has been partnering, but they haven't been partnering on that kind of level, which is probably where they need to go. And that does take some engineering and design work. And so that's what I suspect is going on with them, although I haven't had a briefing with them. So that's going to be my next thing here, to get some time to look at where the roadmap is going. So that could be where they're going, because Wicca is a parallel file system and competes very well with BGFS and GPFS, and which is IBM Scale, and some of the others, and Lustre. So that's where they traditionally have played out. Now they're shifting to some others, to playing out and saying, am I going to compete? How do I compete with VAST, which is, I suspect, is what they're feeling. So the second part of that is where, as I mentioned, Hammerspace has taken off and is doing very well. And the reason why they're doing well is this tier 0 strategy that they have, which is not DRAM, DRAM. It's tier 0 for them. Is what they're doing is they're bringing their capabilities and integrating their metadata management into bringing this very, very fast tier on top of a regular file system. So they're acting like a parallel file system, and they're bringing the speed of what Wicca brings to the table along with some of the capabilities of a regular file system and an ease of use of those environments. And so that seems to be really taking off, also with our partnerships that are out there. So we'll watch this space. As I said, my predictions that this year is going to be the year that we're going to talk about how do we do scale out and what are the differences between these kind of technologies, and why Wicca is doing this, why Hammer is succeeding, why, we're seeing all these investment areas that are going on. So
Interesting times in infrastructure for sure.
yes, very interesting. So with that, guys, do we have anything else? I think I've got my list here. We've been through it. We're kind of down at the bottom of the hour.
Only sorry, Keith, I'll just go real quick. Only that Google dropped Gemini 2.0, their most advanced model.
Forgot about that one.
And includes also Gemini Flash, which is a smaller model. Be able to do things cheaply, because we are seeing, and this is where IBM, for example, competes is with their Granite, is being able to provide high quality answers at much lower price points. But the key point is Gemini 2.0 has been at the very high end of the benchmarks, but hasn't been out yet. This puts Google now with a shipping AI that is at the very, in the top 3 slot on AI benchmarks. So.
And then just from a tactical perspective, I've played around with Google's runtime engine, so GKE, and using that to call the services. It is a really interesting dichotomy of approaches. You can use Gemini to run queries like you would ChatGTP, but less functional from a capability perspective. But the platform to develop applications, top notch. It's really interesting how easily you can call Gemini and other models from Google's runtime. So again, the competition of how to provide these platforms and how to enable them, I think in some of my internal discussions, folks have called LLMs commodities. I don't know if we'll go that far yet.
No, not yet. But it's heading in that direction.
The platforms definitely are not in this ability to consume these models. I think that is a battle that we should probably talk about one day.
Yes, indeed.
Maybe next week while I'm on vacation.
I like how you
Keith and I will have to duke it out.
Yeah, you'll duke it out. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us on this Infrastructure Matters episode number 70. We will be seeing you. Well, I won't see you next week. The two gentlemen will see you next week. I'm on vacation. So with that, thank you very much and have a great week.